Recorded live from the secret underground lair of Crimson Cowl Comics and Collectibles, this is the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast.
The following issues may contain spoilers. It's that time of night to count fingers. I'm Anthony.
I'm Damon.
I'm Kirby.
Welcome to the Crimson Cowl Comic Club spin-off podcast focusing on Hellboy, the comic books, going library edition to library edition. This is our third episode as we dive into the next batch of stories presented in those library editions. So what we are going to do here, this is the BPRD podcast, which doesn't stand for what you think it stands for, because that stands for the Bureau for Paranormal Reading and Discussion. So we are going to jump into it. I have our official dossier here that is going to contain the documents explaining what we're going to cover in this episode. So I'm going to unseal this. The first time that our eyes will be seeing this here, we have a mystery sheet of paper. The stories that we'll be covering in this episode are many because there are a lot of short stories. We are covering Pancakes, Nature of the Beast, King Vold, The Corpse, The Iron Shoes, The Baba Yaga, Heads, Goodbye Mr. Todd, and I might butcher this, but The Varkalak, maybe? A Christmas Underground, and The Chained Coffin. So those are the stories that we are going to cover in this episode. What we do in this podcast, in case you happen to stumble across this one, we are reading the Hellboy comics, some of us for the first time, some of us for a reread, and but now we're going to do it in the order of these library editions. This is Hellboy Volume 2, titled The Chained Coffin and The Right Hand of Doom. But this collection has a bunch of short stories. These comics here, let me give the credits right off the bat. According to the title page, we got, of course, these are done by Mike Mignola, colored by James Sinclair, Matthew Hollingsworth, and Dave Stewart, lettered by Pat Brassow, and edited by Scott Alley over at Dark Horse Comics. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go down the line and in the order of this collection, talk about these stories. We're going to kick it off here with Pancakes. This one's a real simple one. It's got a funny little title that you open up a book called Hellboy and you see pancakes. So this is an extremely, probably the shortest of all the stories, but it's simply about Hellboy wanting noodles for breakfast, and he's going to try pancakes for the first time, and we find out how he reacts to them. It's going to be real hard to like build the suspense and play it out, but we have a lot of stories to talk about, so I guess we don't need to spend a ridiculous amount of time. But I will throw it over to Damon here. What did you think of this opening short story of Pancakes?
Well, I gotta be honest, coming into this collection, seeing all the short stories, I was kind of worried whether or not I'd actually like them, because I'm one that likes, a little more depth. I mean, some short stories are good. It all depends on how good the story is. And after reading this little 2-page story, I'm like, oh, this book's going to be great. Because I'm like, if this is, because this is, you saw in the first volume how in his two, how he creates a story and tells it over multiple issues. And this is the first time you see Mike like do just a like short in your face, here you go. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And then the last box, truly, this is our blackest hour. I just was chuckling because I'm like, this is great. If this is how the rest of the book is going to be, this was a treat. And yeah, very simple, short to the point, and it ended with some comedy. And I thought, oh yeah, I'm not worried about reading this book anymore. I was hooked.
And now when you started to preface that about being worried, I started to get worrying that you weren't going to like this story because I really dug it. So I'm glad that we're on the literal same page of this one. But yeah, simply him claiming that he wants hot noodles for breakfast, which is just hilarious. And pancakes are thrown in front of him, and he's all, being a kid and he's fussy and everything. I think most kids are probably into pancakes, but you got Hellboy, he wants hot noodles for breakfast. But he tries them, and then he just has this great panel, which I'll highlight here on the video, is hey, I love it. It's just real quick and to the point of just being like, yeah, pancakes are pretty great. So, but yeah, fun little short story to kick it off. Uh, for this
Did
whole volume, I got the excited for the short stories, not only for the sake of the podcast of being able to just kind of do these little bite-sized conversations and following this larger epic or anything. I think this did a great job overall of showing just how versatile his storytelling can be. So yeah.
does when he eats the pancakes, does it give him any special powers like a certain shirtless bear fighter?
Now you said pancakes. Now he would probably start getting angry because those are
Flapjack.
flapjacks. Anytime a shirtless bear fighter reference can be thrown into any conversation, is always a welcome one. No, he simply loves it. And then let me just see here. They just do a meanwhile in Pandemonium, which is the capital city of hell. They just have a bunch of people kind of screaming out there, and they're wondering what the noise is about. And what's great is that like this Goat Man character is talking about it is the boy. He has eaten the pancake, and then he goes, "He will never come back to us now." And just the idea of like someone having a pancake, someone like Hellboy having a pancake for the first time, he's not going to want to go back to hell. He wants to stay right there because in hell they don't have pancakes. They might have hot noodles, which is why he is requesting that, but I don't know. Yeah, that story was a joy, I gotta say. All right, the next little short story here is The Nature of the Beast. We're dealing with dragons. Basically, yeah, Hellboy is kind of sent to kill a dragon. Um, Basically, Hellboy is kind of used an experiment throughout the story as, yeah, he's kind of called in for a mission. He goes out on a hunt. He comes in contact with this thing that may or may not exist according to him. And yeah, we see some contact and another short story, but a little longer than the other one. But we'll dive into the details as we talk about it. So, Damon, how about The Nature of the Beast?
This one was all right. It was kind of comical how Hellboy being Hellboy, how he's always thrown into these situations and how it eventually how the beast was slain. It's kind of funny that's the way it turns out. It just kind of sets up more questions that aren't answered. It's like, okay, is this going to be addressed later in the book? Is this going to be addressed in a future volume? But it leaves you wanting more. It's like he like abruptly stopped. And I'm like, no, because I know the next story has nothing to do with it. And I wanted a little bit more. But I did dig the fact, if you read the story, how the lilies or whatever flower that is starts growing out of Hellboy's blood. And I'm like, oh, so he is like the chosen one. And so it's kind of a nice setup. But, it's kind of like I see these people as like, like the Court of Owls and Batman, like the big players behind the scene. And I'm like, I want to know a little bit more. But it was a decent story for what it was.
Yeah, I think it did a good job of like Hellboy's best when he says very little. There are moments he's got some longer paragraphs and stuff, but there's a lot of the story where he's sent on these missions, and you grab the attitude. And once again, the Ron Perlman-ness of it comes. You just hear that voice, but just where he's talking about, all right, you got to go slay this dragon. Yeah, all right. And then going over here, people are telling, he's like, okay. All right, maybe not. It's just a lot of, geez, like there's a lot of just real simple, like it really sets the tone of just how uninterested he is with doing this. And, but, when it comes down to getting into the action, it's, he's always there to get his hands dirty. But yeah, real short, real sweet. Yeah, I did like that whole Lily thing too, and but yeah, so yeah, nature of the beast, simple as that. All right, we are going to jump over to King Vold, which I assume that's how you pronounce that there. This story here, Hellboy is sent to Norway for research. He's learning about the strange happenings and learning more about this King Vold character, who is this like headless horseman type of guy. He comes with like a pack of wolves. The story is basically him leaving one of the wolves with Hellboy as we see this wolf make some interesting transformations, which leads into our action setup of the story here. Um, but it's uh, the King Vold guy kind of goes off on a little mission, and he returns with a character that we don't get too much uh detail with. That once again, a lot of this stuff, wondering if this will play in. Oh yeah, here's the panel. It basically comes back with like this mermaid, which are we to led to believe this mermaid has just been slain or maybe just knocked out or something? But yeah, I just thought that was interesting of just seeing that quick little mermaid panel. But yeah, ultimately it's a test of uh a reward for this gold that this character, once again, a lot of people are setting Hellboy up to kind of do the dirty work so they can kind of get rich and further their expeditions and such. But yeah, ultimately we're dealing with a headless horseman and wolves. Damon, what do you think of this one?
I must say that this one and the next story are probably my two favorite
Mm,
out of the stories that we've read so far. Um, I love I like to study a lot of different cultures and stuff like that, and so just the beginning when they're in Norway and he's like telling them some of like the folk tale type of stories, like this is where this had happened. And I really dug the story of the woman who woke up and thought it was morning and ended up going to church for mass, but it was actually midnight and everyone in the church was actually dead, and she barely, I thought that was a great story. And then the whole giant headless horseman King Vold, and then his wolves, and it was actually a wolf man, and that was great. And I love the setup at the end, whereas he's running off, he actually knows Hellboy's real name, Anunzunrama, and actually calls him that as he's leaving. And at least I believe that's his real name. Um, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe they'll meet again in the future one day. But it's like he knew what was really going on. That's why the gold was cursed, and the guy couldn't even grab onto it, And so I really kind of dug the story. This was my one of my favorites as far as like the it was a real deep story for me with a lot of back history, and it was a really cool one. And then the next one is more of the comical type. But yeah, I really dug it. Like I said, I think this one and The Corpse, which is the next story, are probably my two favorite in the book so far.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because as a reminder, one of the things that we'll do at the end here, talk about, especially since we have a lot of stories, not only will we talk about our favorite one out of this collection, but also picking like a favorite creature or character or panel, whatever. So always keep that in mind in case you didn't get one down. But yeah, that's reminded me of to mention that. So yeah, I did like the headless horseman type of character, and seeing this wolf transformation into this kind of this man wolf beast, and then reverting back to like a normal wolf once the headless horseman returns. But I was looking for, oh yeah, here's a good shot of Hellboy versus the wolf when it turns into a beast. And yeah, left for some awesome action, and then left him making yet another transformation into this berserker, which was very on point for what we're talking about at the time of this recording. Talk about the berserker story with Keanu Reeves over at Boom Comics. but uh but yeah, so seeing that these wolves were a wild man, as they quote here, berserkers. The King's Vold's hounds are the ghost of the Viking berserkers. Whoever heard of such a thing? But yeah, I love all this little lore here, and these are all great setups for just
Does it leave you hanging at all that it might lead into the Wolves of St. August in our next chapter? The wolves look the same as far as drawing wise, but I mean, all the wolves will look the same.
well, it'd be interesting because we are and like the guy that is out there on the mountain or the cliff or whatever who gets his hand those coins that were cursed, leaves a hole in his hand. We do get a little tease about 1 week after in Brooklyn of what's going on and what maybe have happened to this character. So maybe there is still going to be, you know,
We'll have to see you on the next episode.
but yeah, I guess yeah, I'm real curious. I didn't think too much about it, but you guys have both brought it up, just kind of wondering, if there are just little seeds here that are eventually going to be maybe a little sprinkles of ideas that teasing stories, whether he did them. Some of these stories we don't know the exact publishing based on this collection and everything. So it'd be kind of curious to see because this last story that we're talking about, what Kirby had mentioned, how it's going to be, a great follow up to the Seed of Destruction being the first story that we read. So yeah, I wouldn't put it past Mike to kind of have some continuation of what's being planted here.
In the omnibus, it goes Seed of Destruction right into the Wolves of St. Augustine. That's what I was
Okay.
curious about. And I did read it right after the Seed of Destruction, but I can't remember. I thought there was something. I don't know if it was coin related or something in there, but we'll find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that'll be in our next yeah, that's the next one. All right, we'll jump into the corpse here. While in Ireland, Hellboy helps a family whose baby has been taken by fairies. The thieves demand Hellboy buries their dead friend, who is a drunken gambler, in hallowed ground. But in the world of Hellboy, nothing is ever as easy as it sounds. Now, I have a fun little fact. I'm going to let Damon, because he already expressed his interest in this as well as the prior story. But I got a pretty fun fact once he's kind of done talking about what he liked of this one. So go ahead.
Um, yeah, this was great. The Irish, the fairy folk, kind of like the old folk tales kind of come to life in this story. That they make deals and they honor their deals and stuff. And the iron, it I remember seeing a lot of stuff in a lot of movies come to life in these pages. Things from different like horror movies and sci-fi movies, and all come out of this. And then the comical, like the corpse hangs on to him and tells him, where to go. And you walk into a cemetery and everybody's yelling, no room, no room, all the dead people. And it was hilarious. And it's like, keep on moving. And then, just when he gets to the end and he thinks he's almost done, out comes these big creatures in this like hog/troll thing. And it's like, like you said, he never has it easy. There's always a catch. It sounds simple, but nothing ever is. And it was just a lot of fun. Comical, like the corpse looking for his arm and the wench under the water is eating on it. And it was a lot of fun. Like I said, like this one and the previous story were my two favorite. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you mentioned the arm because I did make a note to call that out as my favorite little moment of the story. I'm just trying to find it here. Oh yeah, here we go.
Page
So, yeah,
54.
yeah. So Hellboy is coming up on the corpse that he's dragging around, and he's laying there on the ground, and he's kind of screaming about his arm, and he lost his arm. But we go to the next page. He's like, I lost my arm, and Hellboy's like, I'm sorry, really, but do you need it? I mean, you're already dead, and we gotta go. He's like, do I need it? It's my arm. So like, yeah, there's some good let me gotta point it out before I show it up. Yep. So but yeah, just him arguing with the corpse and is definitely a pretty good moment to favorite there. And yeah, good stuff. And now the fun fact about this, as I pulled the synopsis for some of these on the internet, this one has been reported a couple times as being Mike Mignola's personal favorite of the Hellboy stories.
Oh,
So, I mean, if that's not high praise to seek out the corpse, which I think some of these here have been kind of published into their own little trade paperbacks that have some of the extra stories what we have been reading in here attached to it. So there's a bunch of different ways to collect these stories, but some of the ones that are a little bigger seem to kind of headline those thinner trade paperbacks, and then they're backed up with short stories. So if you're looking for Mike Mignola's a personal favorite, at least at the time that people were reporting it, yeah, the corpse is that's what that's what the internet tells me. I'm very excited after we go through all these eventual library editions to revisit the Making Monsters documentary that I mentioned in our first episode, I think, unless that was in our first one that didn't record. But I mentioned that I had gotten the Kickstarter documentary about Mike Mignola and just him as a comic creator and, creation of Hellboy and everything. And after going through all these, not only rewatching the movies and the animated DVDs, the little specials and stuff like that. I I'm gonna be so amped up to like revisit all the Hellboy that most of us had started with because yeah, we've only dabbled. Some of us haven't read the comics, some of it dabbled out of order. So yeah, this is good stuff.
well, when we finish all these library editions, if all the three of us are really into his world, I know like I have the two Baltimore omnibuses, which are just small, standard size comics. It's not like a big omnibus. And then I know he's got several BPRD
Yep.
series. I'd have to pick those up if we wanted to read them, pick up the trades. But I mean, he's got the whole universe besides just Hellboy. If we all decide we really like it and we want to go beyond just the Hellboy stories.
Yeah, and if we do jump into, because I can tell already that I do want to dive into those BPRD stories, and we'll have to talk to club member Katie from the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast, because I know she loves Hellboy and BPRD, but anytime that she brought some of the stories to the podcast, she always talked about some of those BPRD volumes, and so yeah, we'll have to if we end up doing some of those, it'd be great to work out a time or work to her schedule and see if we can bring her on because I know she's got a lot of love for those stories too. So, but yeah, I think putting the investment into these editions, I'll just go down the line and start getting the other stuff too. So
I just wish they did this format for like the BPRD
yeah,
stories, because trying to find some of them hardcovers are like out of print. And I mean,
yeah,
you can get them in the trades, but I mean, I like the limited, like collected editions, but I digress. That's, for later.
that's another podcast.
I
All right,
see Kirby already left us and just put his placeholder picture in there.
and for those that are watching this, I was going to say listening, they can listen in the background, but this is only as a YouTube exclusive. We do the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast on an almost weekly basis, talking about comic books, new and old, and club discussions for current books and stuff like that. But this one is going to be a YouTube exclusive. So if you're subscribing to the Crimson audio feeds, this is the only way you're going to get this here, just due to free accounts and space and memory and all that stuff. We are going to jump over to the Iron Shoes. This one here is a very simple premise, just talking about what iron kind of repels certain beasts and monsters and goblins and fairies and all these other things that fall under underneath Mike Mignola's pen. But then the story is kind of about something in which iron doesn't repel, as we meet this kind of little goblin type of character.
A
Who
border goblin, I think is what they're called.
Say that one more time.
I think it's called a border goblin.
Border Goblin. Yep, that sounds right. But the entrance of this Border Goblin who jumps in wearing just a fancy pair of these iron shoes here, just kind of crashing through this building, or I forget where he walked into here, this castle or tower. But yeah, this one doesn't waste too much time to get into the fight, and it's a pretty good fight back and forth. And I guess it does wrap up rather quickly here. But the idea of this this little goblin running around with the iron shoes. And once again, I mentioned in the last one where I love any panels with Hellboy falling into the, out of the sky or something, falling out of buildings. So it seems to be a continuous theme here, and someone who could take quite the hit when he falls. But yeah,
He definitely doesn't have cat features because he's always falling head first.
yeah, that is true. And we'll find out in the stories here if it's canonical with the comic books. But in those movies, the Ron Perlman one, he was a big fan of cats, right?
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, maybe in those movies, he's trying to learn from them and study them. But yeah, so Damon, what do you think of the Iron Shoes?
This one was kind of yeah. The one panel where he thought, yeah, there you go, and hung him, and then oh damn, as he's pulled through, that was just funny. But it's like the ending, like I don't get what made him turn to stone and like break into all those pieces. Just by throwing them in the basement of a church. I didn't think goblins would react to. I don't know if maybe it's the sanctity of the religious grounds or something. But it's like once he threw him down in there, you see the goblin hit head first, and then the next panel you see like bits and pieces of him flying with the shoes. So I'm under the impression that he kind of like exploded into like rock or something.
Yeah, it does kind of give that illusion there, and yeah, he's kind of crumbling with the shoes falling, and but yeah, it might just be a whole thing, like you said, with the church and all that stuff that
But
did something. Yeah.
it was all right. It was just filler to get to the next story.
I liked it mostly for that panel that I had mentioned, just the entrance, like the comedy of I guess I'll read as the goblin's dialogue here saying, "Come closer, live or die, win or lose, best beware, my iron shoes." So the rhyme of it all and the very comedic entry, like I was kind of caught off guard with that because you see this creature here and it's almost like a Rumpelstiltskin type of goofy thing being added to this little character. But yeah, I dug it for that. Yeah, there's not a lot of meat on the bones of the story itself, but mostly for the visuals for me is and once again Hellboy falling. So all right. Well, here we go. Here comes a phrase that we hear often, whether it's in the Ant-Man movies, whether it's in the John Wick movies, a very common term, very on point with today's modern pop culture. But we have a story called The Baba Yaga. In March of 1964, Hellboy first encountered Baba Yaga while investigating a string of children disappearing. The disappearances were Baba Yaga's doing as she kidnapped the children to satisfy her cannibalistic hunger. So, yes, this one here, that synopsis pretty much said it all here. I don't think I need to do any kind of setup. Once again, we get the normal, like every mission starting with him just kind of trekking, making his journey and coming in contact, jumping into a big fight and fire. And yeah, so let's just dive into it. What do you think of the Baba Yaga story?
This one is disturbing. The counting of the dead fingers, that was very interesting. It was nice to see how she loses her eye, which was brought up, I believe, in the previous volume. So this was kind of like a prequel to that. And I like the way how it ended, that everything there's a balance, by him shooting her eye out, everyone in that village for the next year that was born blind in one eye. So it's kind of like a balance, and every action there's a reaction and a consequence. And it was kind of a deep and dark story, and I kind of enjoyed it.
A deep and dark story, which ends with like crow and a frog and a cat and a bear that are just kind of hanging out and chatting with each other. And but yeah, that disturbing tale of what you mentioned about the children being born blind in one eye, and that was kind of a real downer at the end there. But yeah, real creepy. The design of the Baba Yaga to show off a good little image here, kind of wearing its she's wearing like a little beanie or something, you know, like. But yeah, that's the design there. Yeah, yeah, I think going back to the going through the cemetery, talking about those, you know, the little hands, the little fingers, the little bones, and the imagery of seeing them kind of all come up out of the graves there, and yeah, anytime walking through a cemetery scene, and the way it's the Baba Yaga just like floating on this like was what are we looking at here? Some little like flying statue thing, or is there a terminology, or what do we look at this vehicle here that the Baba Yaga is traveling on? Any?
Well, no, it does. Isn't the Baba Yaga the one that has that weird flying house?
Oh,
Chicken leg house.
the chicken.
Yep.
Yeah, the chicken leg house. That's right.
And then with your critters that you had there, you had a black cat, you had a crow, and a frog, all things that are related to witchcraft and plagues. There's some type of symbolism between that too.
But yeah, I was just kind of wondering like what this actual thing is. You see, here's a better image of flying above the.
Yeah, it looks like a giant like goblet, or like a goblet or chalice or.
Yeah, yeah. Just cruising around in that little thing. So.
Sort of
But yeah,
mojo.
She likes to fly on weird objects instead of flying on brooms.
yeah, I completely forgot about the. Even though we talked about the B&B of the Mike Mignola B&B and the chicken leg house, but yeah, that's right. But yeah, I guess that's that. Jump into the next one here. Heads in Kyoto, Japan. This is 1967. Hellboy is investigating a rumor of an evil house, quote unquote, next to a local lake. There, where something terrible had happened that drove the local population away from it and caused the village around it to fall to ruin. It is said that the demons live in the house. Now, this one I really dug. I like a lot of Japanese stuff, so putting Hellboy into Japan like this and having this creepy tale once again, putting him into this house, he comes across these Japanese people that are just sitting there in the house and invite him in and talking about where he can stay. And very quickly, 'cause there's a story here I highlighted here, that there's a story about a farmer and a ghost woman. One of the Japanese people says, a farmer met a ghost woman and she gave him a golden box, but said, "You must never open this." He took it home and hid it from his wife, but one day she found it and looked inside, and it was full of gouged out human eyes. And at the moment, the farmer dropped dead in his field. The wife went mad and lived the rest of her days like an animal. The end. And then there's a little giggle by somebody, just a little hee 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 hee, hee. And it was just like the delivery of that, and then leading to Hellboy just being like, "Wow, that is a funny story. I just realized I'm awfully tired," and he's like, "Yeah, I got to get out of there." Like, so yeah, that was my favorite little moment of that, just kind of coming into this creepy house and realizing like, all right, I'm done here, but jumping into this, uh going into the room and then hearing voices from the other room again, and Hellboy, grabbing his gun and creeping out, and the people that he was just talking to are all still sitting there, but they seem to be missing their heads, hence the story title. And once it just kind of cut to that, you see like because I don't know if they had like a little fire going, there's a little smoke. Yeah, yeah, that a little fire going. So the fire is out and the smoke is up, and Hellboy is just kind of wondering, it's like, where the hell are your heads? And the story continues as we jump into the woods, and all of those heads are just kind of floating around, and wondering where Hellboy went, and he had went off, and or they're wondering where the bodies, yeah, Hellboy, because he dumped these bodies into the nearby lake, and he strings them up. He's got a big like anvil weight type, I can't think of the term right now, but he strings all the bodies together, and so that they all these headless bodies go to the bottom the water here, and yeah, and it just continues to get creepier as Hellboy is now surrounded by all these heads, and everything about this story I was into just because it got real creepy real fast after a
Uh,
very funny story.
did
Dan, thoughts on heads?
This was the next one in my list of favorites for the story. I really dug this one as well. I also enjoy that Japanese type of culture and stuff, and I thought this was neat. I kind of reminded me of something. I remember seeing similar kind of takes on this where like the heads would be, you'd see heads floating in the woods and all that, but I can't remember exactly where that was. But I really dug this story, and I'm like, I knew from the beginning something was off. Oh, no one is that nice. So come on in, very safe, very safe. Really, no one else will live around here. And then just like you, when he told that joke, I'm like, okay, something's rotten in Denmark. Time to get out. And yeah, I thought this was a fun story.
Yeah, and they
did
tell
that
him once he goes into the room, they tell him sleep well, and he's just like looking at what's in his room and what he just experienced. And he's like, "Yeah, oh, they're saying it's very safe." He's like, "Yeah, I bet."
did that story have anything to do with vampirism?
No.
Because with Japanese lore and beheadings and stuff like that, and could lead into vampiric culture, but I didn't read it, so
Yeah, they
Now they're
seem to,
basically demons, and if they were
if you
separated,
follow Japanese folklore, they pretty much are all demons. Even the vampires, they're a weird. They're not like our vampires at all. They're more demon form. So,
yeah, no, if they're not attached to their bodies by daylight, they die. And that was how he pretty much killed them. They couldn't find their bodies in time, and the sun came up, and I pictured Gandalf going, "The daylight will take you all," and there they go, turn to stone, and they die.
and then
which
after all,
vampires do in like.
Yeah,
and after all that, Hellboy has a cigarette. So
there you go. Last lines of the story. There you go.
all right, so next one here is Goodbye, Mr. Todd. All these stories we've been jumping around from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and I think some are in the 80s as well. But that's what's kind of fun about some of these short stories, just kind of catching all these kind of random little BPRD missions Hellboy is sent on. And it's important to say too that these are all just solo Hellboy stories, or he's not, paired up with Liz or Abe. We see Abe in one of the stories later, but yeah, it is unique that it's all just following Hellboy alone here. But back in the late 70s here, Hellboy travels to Portland, Oregon. And we once again talk about Marianne Glozik, if that's how you pronounce it, assistant to Mr. Todd, who is called the BPRD for help a few years before Hellboy had seen Mr. Todd, a physical medium, perform. However, Mr. Todd had fallen on hard times and had started using drugs to help him get into trances. This time he contacted not the regular spirit world, but something else entirely in the form of a tentacled being that partial manifest from Mr. Todd's ectoplasm. So yeah, feel free to jump in. Oh yeah, I forgot one of the images I just turned to. What do you think of Goodbye, Mr. Todd?
For some reason, this one for me was kind of hard to follow. I had to reread a couple things a couple times. Plus, I was trying to rush through this when I read it, and not one of my favorites, and kind of weird. I don't think his depiction of like the tentacles and the small, I don't think it really came across very good. This is probably, so far out of everything we've read, probably some of the weaker art that I didn't really care too much for. So yeah, a little confusing, a little lackluster. The art is, a little something to be desired, and I just saw it as filler onto the next.
That's fair, and yeah, with the because we do see those ectoplasms, but yeah, I guess the way they're represented, they're very whited out. not going into too much detail or different experiments, experimenting with colors and stuff, but still kind of just keeps that kind of like off-white tone throughout. Um, but yeah, the ectoplasm and this kind of the flaming head, and as we see the tentacles come out there. I dug some of the imagery. I could understand how, yeah, the story itself a little harder to follow, but yeah, the Mr. Todd kind of making some transformations as he's kind of blowing up towards the end and kind of cracking and kind of we've seen a trend of that happening with the Hellboy stories. A lot of the characters kind of crumbling or disintegrating right before his eyes. But yeah, as I flip through this, I'm trying to see if there was anything else to pick out, and I didn't make any extra notes, so I might not have too much to say about this one either. But yeah, I guess that's it there. Yeah. We'll move on to the one that we'll see if you have a more accurate pronunciation. What are we looking at here? The Varkalak?
Works for me. I don't know what the little like Anya or whatever symbol over the A.
Yeah, this is
It's
one of
like
those situations
Eastern
where
Europe type of, like I'm picturing this like Romania, Ukraine, somewhere, Yorkshire. So I guess, all right, that's England. Not what I was picturing. I must have missed that. So
this is one of those things where if Jim were here from the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast, he's usually good with some foreign pronunciations and stuff like that. But we're just gonna go with the Varkalak.
for me,
This very simple premise here, and I'm glad Kirby came back because we are dealing with an ancient demonic deity who is also the king of all vampires. So yeah, basically he is going out, yeah, in Yorkshire. We're in the early '80s. He's going out to this kind of abandoned castle building sort of place, but he encounters the Countess Alona Kokosi, and talking about basically going into her coffin is sitting there below. Let me get this here. Coffin is resting below her portrait there, and Hellboy's getting ready to go in and stake her. But as he attempts that, he basically is falling through, more falling this time, going lower and not starting from a high place, but going crashing through the floor and kind of finding all this rubble and some more like coffins and monuments, and quickly comes across more of these. I guess these zombified corpses here that are quickly to chase him through this scene. But they're all talking about the Varkalak. And let me just flip here to see where we're going here. Oh, yeah, here we go. So, Kirby, we're getting into some vampires and some bats and some creatures. What do you think of this story there, Damon?
this one I dug, and just to give you an example that I'm not hating on Magnolia. In the last one, he did, those tentacles and the ectoplasm clouds, and I'm like, and not really that great. Can't see a lot of detail in this, the two color. Now here he did a lot of like simple stuff. I can try to show an image like on the bottom of this page and like the top of this page. It's simple, just two color, but I don't know if it's maybe because I see what it is. I my eyes pulled the detail out of that. I thought this was like better done. I dug the art, I dug the story, everything. I mean, even the simple like the bats and everything looked great. Like the one panel that you already showed, and come to find out that it was all just in his head. That she had that kind of power to. For him to hallucinate all this, trying to convince him not to kill her. I thought it was a good story.
This is the one of the longer ones, if not the longest one. But yeah, that instant to that last page where we're into this adventure the whole time, and the whole interaction with the Varkalak, but then just being caught right back or being brought back to where we were in the beginning, where he still has the arm up and open it up, and he was getting ready to actually just yeah, he had opened it up ready to stab, but the whole time that none of that even happened because he was under the her control and the visions. Now, just because you called out some of the art styles, I wanted to highlight this panel where I started to see a little what's known as the Kirby crackle from Jack Kirby as we get into these all red the panels that are all red. I don't want to say all red panels; those are something else. But yeah, he's just with the all the black, ink blots and stuff around him. There was very Kirby Crackle esque. So I really dug that imagery. He's kind of like falling into the either the water or the pool of blood, whatever whatever is being told there. But
Now, here's my question to you. Every time you see her, she's got them like lime green eyes. And the very last panel I get where it says the end, you see looks like I'm assuming that that's like a cloud of smoke, but I'm assuming that's one of her eyes. So is she really dead? Or
oh
was
yeah,
him stabbing her another illusion?
yeah, I don't think I've ever noticed that at the very end, but I see it now, and I'm flipping back and looking at
Like just at the top of that page, you can see her eyes are that same shade of green. And if you flip one page back on page 100, you see her head right next to Hellboy's, and she's got the same green eyes. And at the very beginning, she's got just about every time you see her, she's got them green eyes. Yeah. And then
Yep,
that last
nice.
image, it's like I picture that as like one of her eyes open behind the cloud of smoke. And it's like, so is she really dead? Or what's to be continued, I guess, is
Yeah, that's a nice
what
little
I know
catch. 'Cause,
what it.
he went and stabbed, and it's just kind of left there, and basically just like, "Yep, how's that?" And then, but yeah, I that makes me look at the story in a whole different way now.
And I don't know if it helps at all, but Barkalak is a Romanian surname.
Okay.
Anything, but they pronounce it Barkalak when I clicked on the audio version.
Okay. Yeah.
Kirby with the drop in. Way to
Gotta
go.
do something since I didn't read them.
You got the
Well, you got
fact check.
Hellboy's cat there, so that's good.
But yeah, this one, I think this is definitely a stronger one of the longer stories in this collection, but it definitely takes advantage of that as he's kind of led on this little journey here and all these attacks. And but yeah, I'm just once again just looking at this a whole different way with the with that green eye reveal at the end that I never noticed. So
I could be wrong. I'm just assuming though, because her eyes were that color,
yeah.
that's one of her eyes. I don't know.
Well, it's definitely something good, and it's not one of those where they do the end question mark, but that
Well,
might
he
just be
puts the end at the end of every
hmm, yeah.
story. I mean, there was the end at the end of the Baba Laga, and we're gonna see her again.
This is
Because
like this is one of those things that if that is meant to be her eye, like someone traditionally may just do the end question mark and then really draw attention to it, but that might be
real
just to throw
subtle.
you off even more because yeah, I mean I saw the end, I'm like, all right, that's it, she's done. But yeah, we'll have to stay tuned. All right, so we are coming up to just checking the time here, and it's hard to tell how much we were recording because we had a session of non-recording. But yeah, we'll go ahead with it here because we are on our penultimate story. Just wanted to call that out for if Jim ends up watching this. We have A Christmas Underground. Hellboy visits a dying woman in England on Christmas Eve in the late 80s. He learns that the woman's daughter Annie disappeared 5 years ago and agrees to give Annie a Christmas present from her mother. Um, Before we jump into this, there's something I'm gonna call out here. Now, I'll say this before I call it out. Damon, is there anything that was very unique about this story, image-wise, that could, with Hellboy, that made you think of anything? I'm keeping it very vague, so I just don't call it out. Is there something, a certain panel of how Hellboy is kind of looked at That
Yes, yes.
so
I don't want to say Nick. He looks
well,
more like Krampus rather than jolly old Christmas. But
let's just say that there's a moment where this old dying woman is sitting here, and Hellboy comes in to kind of sit with her, and and she's talking about knowing that he would show up, and then but I thought I'd you thought I didn't recognize you. He's like, ma'am. He goes, well, you're Father Christmas. And we see this panel here of Hellboy and then the Father Christmas, and you know someone who played Hellboy in a movie called his name is David Harbour. He had also played a character of Santa Claus, in another movie called Violent Night. But the connection, I just love the idea that we have Hellboy and a Santa type character, and David Harbour has done both. So when I just saw that, that's the imagery I thought of immediately, and I think I tweeted it out, but I just had the panel line up here. And I
it's
think
like our own like Nostradamus here. It's like Mike 30 years ago predicted that Hellboy would also play Christmas. Santa Claus.
I
It's
thought
like
I had, yeah.
the predictions are real. Oh,
So I just wanted to get that, right, because that was my note that I made for that one, just because I geeked out and I found a picture of David Harbour as Santa Claus, and I paired all those panels together, and I just wanted to call that out. So yeah, anyways, a tale here, Christmas Underground. You got Hellboy coming in, and this very tragic story about this woman who was dying, and talking about um, what the loss, basically everyone in the family, and the loss of children, and basically finding a place somewhere where all of the dead relatives are basically go to live, and she's on the deathbed, and just a lot of sadness, and kind of beautiful sadness, I'll say that. It's kind of a touching little story here, and we get very different imagery as Hellboy is kind of taken through this scenario by with this, and I'm trying to remember the girl in the yellow dress. Are we talk? Is that the daughter?
yes.
Yeah, the Annie. Um, but I really love that panel there of they're basically arm in arm, and she has a lot of like Belle and the Beauty. It's like a Beauty and the Beast thing going on here, and that's what I really dug just about that imagery. And um, yeah, I just there's beautiful sadness. Once again, I'm going to go on with that. What'd you think of Christmas Underground?
Yeah, it was. I agree with you right there. It was kind of like a darker fairy tale type of story, and it's like like in your Beauty and the Beast, the rose held the power over the beast, and he had to, and here it was the ring. As soon as she took the ring off, it turned into like this little like lizard type thing, and that's where the power was, keeping them all here, and I'm assuming preventing them from moving on, to heaven or whatnot, and that this rat monster or whatever you want to call him was keeping her here with the power of that ring. And then I thought it was a nice ending, and it was yeah, like you said it best with that. You know it was nice. I dug it.
And we'll take a little sidestep here because artist Justin Castaneda, I believe is the pronunciation, but a little original sketch of the Violent Night of David Harbour as Santa Claus in Violent Night that I had picked up for Kirby. He had given me some money and told me to buy some stuff that he would like. And I want to, can you position it up just a tad?
Yeah, from here it looks like Charles Manson.
Oh, there we go. That looks good at that angle. That's perfect.
Okay,
So yeah,
that's better.
so you see him there. He's all bloodied up. He's got the mallet over the shoulder, but that is an original sketch there by Justin. And so yeah, that was good timing on that, because if we had done this episode normally when it should have been last week, we wouldn't have had that little extra connection there. So a lot of good timing here with this one. But yeah, it's the idea of her on like her deathbed and giving Hellboy box, and asking to give it to her daughter Annie, making sure that she gets it, and him, saying that he'll make sure. And yeah, just yeah, this is a top favorite of mine for sure. But yeah, and it's all just during Christmas time. It's just it's a lovely Christmas story. Um, yeah. Anything else to say about that one at all?
Nah.
All right. Yeah, I will call out. We kind of talked about it some, but just I'll hold off these pages here. Just awesome splash pages that just seeing just the way it's laid out. We kind of see something different. A lot of white backgrounds, which we aren't we don't see too often with some of these stories. A lot of yellows and just the in between panels there, just kind of just the beautiful symbolism of the rings and everything. But yeah. All right. Now we're going to jump into a story here that I've read, Damon has read, and Kirby has read. Because based on our collections and the books we're reading from, this one, Kirby does have the story for. So I will give the setup, and then I will throw it over to Kirby first so he can do some talking after the fact checking and doing all the research. He's covering the research part of the BPRD there. But all right, here we go. We are talking about the chained coffin. Hellboy travels back to East. Is this Bromwick? Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, East Bromwick, where he has a vision of a priest and a nun standing vigil over the chained coffin of their mother to protect her soul. This story is basically narrated through a letter, and is the first time we'll see Abe Sapien in the story here. I'll show off that panel of him opening up a letter, reading it from Hellboy, kind of talking about what he does after certain missions that are kind of harder for him and they take a toll on him. And he just he's taking a stroll through this going back to the location where you could still see the scorch marks on where he showed up here on Earth, and going back to that, following up of the Seed of Destruction story. But yeah, it's him revisiting that area, and it's all being told through a letter that he had sent to Abe about what had occurred as he visits that time again. And what are we talking? Is it like 10 years after the fact, I think? Or is it even longer? Am I reading that right? Oh, maybe
Yeah,
50
I'm
years
not
ago.
sure.
Yeah, maybe it's okay. Maybe I was thinking something else. But anyways, this is the chain coffin. I'm gonna just throw it over to Kirby right away. What are your thoughts on this story?
And basically, I know he mentions that he goes back there after every like bad case he deals with that's a little too stressful or whatever. But yeah, I like this story. This was my favorite one since it was the only one I got to read this time. But it in the first omnibus, it follows right after the Wolves of St. Augustine, which comes right after Seed of Destruction. It's a nice follow up to Seed of Destruction, going back to the place he was born. And it's like I look at it. I read the story 3 times now, and I look at it like a love letter to the womb. It's like he was born without parents and born from the earth, and he's just going back to that place because that's his attachment to it all, and getting that little feel of his parental figures and stuff like that. I thought it was really interesting how they laid that out, and I wish he'd try and learn more from his father's side and find out more about his powers and what he could possibly do. But yeah, I really like that story.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Is this the one where he kind of talked about that he hasn't been curious about any of this stuff? Am I thinking the right one? When he's thinking back on just like what all this stuff means and where he comes from, that he really has no interest.
Yeah, he mentions that in here, and
Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah.
then of course we meet the Guardians and stuff after that.
This is where I was thinking the 10 years part. Yeah, where Trevor Broom spent 9 years studying this church and never found anything that was good enough for me. He goes, I wasn't even curious. But yeah, just wondering if he should be curious, but he's not, and just how, yeah, he really has no interest in learning more about it. But yeah, him revisiting that.
But yeah, when he goes back, he can see the spirits. And whereas Trevor couldn't. So
All right, Damon, what'd you think of the chained coffin here?
It was a decent story. I think the best thing that I took away with that is it's the first time it really shows how much of a relationship Hellboy has with Abe, how kind of close they are. Because Hellboy's kind of like the rough and tough, doesn't want to talk to anybody, but yet he's opening up to Abe, even though it is in the form of a letter about something that is deeply personal and something that he has to try and deal with all the time. And he wouldn't do that to just anybody. The fact that he's doing this to Abe, it really kind of shows the kind of relationship that they have. And that's the biggest takeaway I take from the story, is it's kind of setting up the relationship between them and where this could go in the future.
And while that is all very heartfelt and everything, and asking for a story that they can just keep between themselves, but we cut to Abe here at the end of the story, who is just catching some Z's and he's trimming a fish. But yeah, I like that little like real heartfelt letter, a very personal letter there, and the message at the end, and that we just cut to Abe sleeping.
basically, that's a letter to another brother. It's like,
But I thought it was great. I love seeing when he goes back in there and he's sees the priest and the nun, and then when the the imagery, all that stuff is just kind of replaying in front of him there. And
I hope we go back to his mother's teenage years. I mean, this all started when she was 16 and stuff with her and his father. I'm kind of curious what all happened between then and when she passes, because she did live to a ripe old age, the way it looks.
all right, well, I think that's going to do it. Is there any other things to add for the chain coffin before we kind of do an overall wrap up of these set of stories? All right, then we are going to move into what we are going to end the shows with here, kind of talking about our favorite creature and or panel, or just anything that kind of really stood out. Now, normally if we're dealing with some fewer stories told at much longer lengths, but we're dealing with multiple stories here. And to buy anybody some time here, I know Kirby's got to pour through a lot of these extra stories here and find through pancakes and all of the stories. But no, I will kick it off here just to buy anybody else some time. The one character that stood out for me, and I'm going to flip to the page 48 of this library edition, going back to the corpse story, as we see Jenny Greenteeth. The name is great. And page 48, I said here. Once again, it falls in line with my love of like the water creatures and such. But Jenny Greenteeth, we have this one panel here, just seeing the design of that character and just how skinny and bony and long hair, and then when we see the character later on, we talked about that with the arm and the corpse, and Damon had called it out, but I'm not sure if we showed it up on the panel here. So to piggyback off of that imagery, seeing the knot on the arm there and stuff, but the initial image of the diving in and the hand kind of creeping out from the water, that's my favorite little like moment there. I just love that design. So that is Jenny Greenteeth, which once again I'm hoping is a character that we'll revisit. Hopefully this is a little seed and we get more of Jenny. All right, jump over to Damon. Do you have a favorite creature or panel in all of these stories?
I'm gonna have to go with King Vold.
There we go.
It is probably he seems like he's all there,
Except for his head.
right, but I mean he knows what's going on. He knows the human is just puny and a sap and despicable, and so that was the game. And I think his first appearance I can hold this up. It's very like awe-inspiring, the giant, he's coming in with out his head, and that it's on page 24 if you want to see it.
That's what I was trying to find. Yep.
And yeah, so I'd say he's my favorite. Either that or the corpse, the actual corpse, like me arm, get my arm and all that. And it's funny you bring out that the sea witch, because while I was seeing her, I was picturing I don't know if you're familiar with Meg Mucklebones from the movie Legend. I don't know if you've never seen them. Oh, all right, well then never mind. But if you've seen the Tom Cruise movie, Ridley Scott film from the 80s called Legend, there's a green witch creature that comes out of the water. Her name is Meg Mucklebones, and she's almost like the live action version of this creature.
You know, it's so weird. We're having a lot of coincidences with the David Harbour stuff going on, the Baba Yagas, watching the John Wicks and all that stuff. Friend of mine, Matt Rogers, co-creator of Happy Astronaut, as well as a co-founder of Cartoonist by Night, that has been talked about for many weeks at this point, since we are recording this. He brought up Legend in a reference that I just didn't get, because I'm like, I'm not familiar. And then he's like, you haven't seen that? And he goes, well, if you have the opportunity, I recommend it. He didn't, go any further with details, but it was just kind of hit me where I'm just like, wait, did we talk about Legend? Because we were talking about movies recently after watching John Wick and everything. And now it just hit me where I'm just like, oh, that's weird. A whole completely other conversation. I was talking about Legend, so I might have to see this movie.
Anytime you want to watch it, even Kirby too. I do own.
Oh, we got it. It's one of Shelley's favorite movies. We've just seen it not long ago again.
Yep. So Anthony, if you want to come over one day and watch it, perfect. It's a fantasy, I would say a fantasy adventure film, but more fantasy.
Yeah,
And
if
it's
you like anything
probably,
like Willow and all those.
yeah, and it's
like
got
that.
probably the best practical makeup ever in a movie, with what they did with Tim Curry to make him into Lord Darkness. That's all I'm gonna say.
It's Shelley's favorite actor.
Yep. Yeah, I love Tim Curry. So anytime, Anthony, you're welcome to come on over and check it out.
I was gonna look on my phone to see where I could watch it, and then I just opened it up and it said Damon real big. So I guess I figured it out.
And my whole house is clean now, so we can watch it anywhere. So perfect.
Good. Well, time to mess it up then. I'll come over and flip couches and
Yeah, there you go.
cool. But yeah, it was just kind of weird that Legend. It just kind of hit me where I'm like, wait, I was having deja vu for a second, but all right. So yeah, I'm curious about that now because of the Jenny green teeth and all that. All right, so we're gonna jump over to Kirby. Do you have a favorite creature or panel from either the story you've read or even the multiples that we've shown you here? Do you have one that jump-
Since I read one story, the chain Coffin, my favorite was, of course, the supposed biological father of Hellboy. I'd like to know more about that creature and his beast form and stuff. Looked interesting to me. After listening to you two talk about all the other stories, I would have to guess that my favorite character would have been the corpse that lost his arm. Just he sounds
very
the most
much
fun.
the corpse had, kind of like with the what's the other character that's that backpacks with him? What the heck is that? We've seen it in the movie too. The I can't think of the name, but isn't it like a similar thing too, where he's got got another character on his back? Yeah, we'll cut all that out. I can't think of the name, because isn't there another corpse like that he goes on a journey with that directs him where to go, or is this the exact same thing?
I don't know. All I can think of is Ash Williams with the corpse on his back ever since you said it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that was in because I had gotten some. I wonder if that was from a 25th anniversary reprint, because I know Dark Horse did those, I think, for like 25 cents or something, and so maybe that was taken from one of the other stories, but I just forgot about it. So whatever, I'll cut that out. Like I said, do a little Art Baltazar editing. So All right. Oh yeah. So that is going to close it out there for the favorite creature panel. But because we do have multiple stories here, and Damon has kind of give us a little hint where he was leading into, I may have dropped a little nugget or two on what my favorite story is. But Damon, if you had to pick between those two that you were going back and forth with, what is your favorite story of this collection?
Oh, it would have to be, either the corpse or King of Old. But if I had to absolutely pick one out of the two,
You
I
have
probably would go with the corpse, just
Okay.
because of the fairy, the Ireland, the characters in it, and the comedy. I'd say the corpse is probably the best in the book.
Cool, cool. And I tried scaling back my enthusiasm when talking about the story, but heads, the Japan story, and going in there and just the comedy right into the creepiness and the flying heads and the putting the bodies, burying them into the water, and just the that was my favorite one. I dug the heck out of that one. So out of everything we've read Hellboy so far through these volumes, that one's sticking with me. I love that one. And then Kirby, out of all the stories that you've read in this collection, do you have a favorite?
I guess I'd have to say the chain coffin,
Now, since
but
that
I
was
most want to read the corpse really bad. So
that's what I was going to ask you is out of the ones that we talked about, and once again, that was one that is reportedly so. If the internet is true, which we always know it is, that it is Mike Mignola's personal favorite at the time of whenever that was written of that article. So, but yeah, I think that's on the Hellboy wiki where some of these synopses have come from. So yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Out of everything that how we talked about and presented it, seems like the corpse has a pretty top tier winner there. Cool, cool. All right, well, that is going to do it for this volume of this edition of this episode, I should say. But we are halfway through volume 2 of the Giant Library Edition. What we're going to do in our next available episode is we're going to dive into the rest of these stories, which includes the Wolves of Saint August, Almost Colossus, The Right Hand of Doom, Box Full of Evil, The Afterword. Okay, that's all bonus stuff. But the Afterword story notes, sketchbook, we'll comment on that stuff too. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stories to cover, a little longer stories than the ones prior. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do in our next episode for anybody that wants to read along, and I'll post that within our group as well as the day that we will jump into that and check it out. Any final thoughts on anything that we have discussed or read? All right, we are going to move on then. If you're not familiar with us, if you happen to search Hellboy and this magically popped up on YouTube, we are from the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast, which you can find over at crimsoncowl.com, which has a bunch of free web comics that are created by the co-creator of the Crimson Cowl, the co-founder. You can email us crimsoncowlcomicclub@yahoo.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube. That's how you're seeing this now, because this ain't part of the audio. So hit that subscribe button and check out our weekly show as well. The Crimson Cowl, all one word, on Instagram. Crimson Cowl Comic Club on iTunes for the audio version, but we do videos of the weekly club podcast as well. Kirby has a spin-off podcast called Under the Cowl of MS. Subscribe, like, and share, and rate and review wherever you get your podcasts there. Also available on YouTube. I have some hobby artist accounts, Anthony Latch, LAATSCH, over on Facebook and Instagram to follow the hobby artist accounts. And my new show that I've co-created with some artist friends, Cartoonist by Night. Go to cartoonistbynight.com and subscribe on YouTube for that brand new drawing show. And that is going to do it for this episode of the BPRD podcast, the Bureau for Paranormal. Hold on here. What's it called again? The Bureau for, I'm scrolling up to the top of my notes. I should have this memorized. For
Bureau of Paranormal Research and Development.
Reading, but our podcast is
Oh.
BPRD stands for something different. That's what I have to put at the end of the show. Bureau for Paranormal Reading and Discussion. That's what this BPRD stands for. So that is going to do it for this
There
episode.
goes our whole budget to cut that little fib out.
Yep. All right. This whole time I dearly would love to see a Mothman.
I'm really hoping the next time someone gives me money, it doesn't burn a hole through my hand.
I've been chained to a bitten off hand in hell.
Until next time, why be a person when I can live under a log with you guys?
Thank you, Slimer.
From the ashes of the greatest comic book store in the universe, these comic book fan friends band together to review new comics, graphic novels, collected editions, and the occasional back issue. Led by host Anthony Latch, together they form the Crimson Cowl Comic Club podcast.